My name is Tammy Barlette, and I retired from the United States Air Force in 2018 as a lieutenant colonel. On 9/11, I was a T-37 instructor pilot. So for my 9/12 story, initially, not much changed for me as far as my job goes. I continued to instruct in the T-37 because my wartime and peacetime mission was pretty much the same. After my time in the T-37 was up, I was moved on to the A-10 Warthog. So I attended training at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, and then I moved on to Korea, where our wartime peacetime mission was to stay in Korea. So I did not deploy in the A-10 to Afghanistan. I came back to the United States in 2005, and I was in the Bulldogs at that point, an A-10 squadron. But unfortunately, due to an aircraft incident, I needed to have cervical spine reconstruction. So once I had that surgery, I was grounded for 6 months and things changed for me. Because of that surgery, I transitioned into a full-time position in the Arizona Air National Guard in a squadron that was just being stood up, a Predator squadron. As a T-37 instructor pilot, and then an A-10 pilot, I never thought I would be flying unmanned platforms, what we call remotely piloted aircraft now. But it was the best place for me to be at the time with my cervical spine reconstruction, and I was just about to get married. So I joined the Air National Guard full-time, and I went through training in the MQ-1 Predator up at Creech. And my first really interaction with the wartime mission was sitting at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, flying missions 24/7, 365, Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, everything. And the interesting thing is that there were so many people around me that some of them had a bad attitude about not being in an aircraft anymore. But the bottom line for me is I loved the mission. I thought it was even though I wasn't physically in an airplane anymore, I knew that every single day I was making a difference. Now I was flying up at Nellis because our facilities at Davis-Monthan weren't built yet. So once they were built, we transitioned back to flying out of Tucson. And I got married and I had a daughter. And what's interesting about this whole getting pregnant thing, which is where a lot of my story actually lies, is when I got pregnant, I went to the flight doc very quickly because I was really excited. And I said to the flight doc, I think I'm pregnant. I just want to make sure. And he got the test results and he said to me, congratulations, you're pregnant, you're grounded. And I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. I said, what am I grounded for? I am 3 feet off the ground in a trailer sitting on the base, just the other side of this base that we're sitting on right now, doing a wartime combat mission. I am needed. And he said to me, well, the regulations haven't caught up yet. And so we have to apply heavy aircraft regulations to you. So they grounded me my first trimester, and I was allowed to fly my second trimester. And they were going to ground me again my third trimester. But during the time that I was flying my second trimester, I worked with the flight doc and got all the data they needed to get the regulation changed so that I could continue to fly the mission. I believe at this point, I was either in Sandoval or in charge of weapons. I'm not sure, but the bottom line is we needed everybody. There was just so much going on in Iraq and Afghanistan at that time. We were flying both missions. We could literally walk into one of our control stations, fly a mission in Iraq, get out of that control station, take a quick break, and then go fly a mission in Afghanistan. So we needed everybody that we could find. So it was really important that I could keep flying, and we got the regulation changed so that I could. And what's interesting about that is that there was one particular mission, and this occurrence with the regulation change was with my daughter. So my daughter is 14 months older than my son. So I got pregnant quickly after that. We wanted to have 2 children close together. And so here I am, pregnant again. I am 7 months pregnant at this point. And thankfully, with this pregnancy, because the regulation changed, I flew from, I think, 5 weeks. From the first time they did an ultrasound and said, yep, you're good, you can go fly. I got to fly all the way up until 36 weeks. So now it's child number 2, and I am flying. I mean, I'm doing everything everybody else is doing because I wanted to kind of show everyone that just because I'm pregnant doesn't mean I couldn't do the job. So I was flying every shift they were flying. I was sleeping on the cot, doing overnights while I had a baby at home, just proving that this mission matters and we can do it as women, even if we're pregnant. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should do that because everyone's, story is different. But for me, it was important that I felt good. I was still running. I was still working out. I wanted to fly. I wanted to do my job. And that's what I did. So now I'm second pregnancy, I'm 7 months pregnant, and I had asked for a bathroom break. And so one of the instructor pilots, the other instructors pilots in the squadron, he came in to just kind of monitor the plane so I could go to the bathroom. I came back and he turns around and looks at me and he goes, "You got a 9 line." Now that means that we had a target. And although, we did shoot targets, sometimes it wasn't that frequent. Different squadrons had a lot of times different amounts of targets, and we did a lot of reconnaissance. And so I said, okay, no problem. I mean, having an A-10 background with close air support, it was kind of already what I was used to. And I understood how the mission went. And everybody in the squadron did. There just wasn't a ton of shooting at that time, but things were picking up. And so he leaves. I sit down in the seat with the sensor operator that I had been working with. And we get our clearance and we release a missile and get desired weapons effects. It was really interesting because I really think that I probably was the first pilot in my 3rd trimester to shoot a missile at the enemy and achieve desired effects. And I say that because I'm certain there have been pregnant women who didn't know they were up there flying, but I mean, to have somebody be 7 months and, doing the job, doing the combat mission, being able to still do what we need to do. It was really nice to be able to continue to impact my mission in a way that made a difference for our troops on the ground, because that's what mattered to me. I needed to keep those guys and gals on the ground over in Afghanistan safe. And that's what I did that day. And it was funny because we were communicating on the radio and we were also chatting in the classified chat. And I said to the guy, the JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller, the guy who was controlling our shot, I said to him in the chat, I said, clearly from my voice, you can tell that I'm female, but I wanted to let you know I am 7 months pregnant, because it was just kind of a new thing. And I actually flew with a pregnant sensor operator and a pregnant intel officer. So the whole crew at one point was all pregnant. It doesn't mean you can't do your job. So that was kind of my, one of my most memorable experiences. But the bottom line with 912 and my 912 story was really for me that even though I wasn't physically in a cockpit anymore, I wanted to make the biggest impact I could to help as many people as I possibly could. It's not about my ego. It never was. It was all about making everyone else as safe and, better at their jobs as I possibly could. Coming from an A-10 background was very valuable to a Predator squadron. So when I was actually 5 months pregnant, so 2 months before this shot scenario, I was asked to go to weapons school. And knowing what weapons school was, I almost initially said, no way, I'm not doing that. Who am I to go to weapons school? I just, but my husband told me, you have to go. You have to go. You can't turn down an opportunity like this. So even though we were going to have an 18-month-old and a 3-month-old, when I left for weapons school, we decided that was what I would do. That was the best way to impact my squadron, to learn as much as I could about the Predator and the Reaper and its mission, and bring all that knowledge back to the squadron, and so I could make our squadron as best as I possibly could. So I did. I went to weapons school. And it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And obviously those 6 months I was away from the mission. And, I missed a lot of things with my younger kids growing up. I mean, they were 18 months and 3 months, but lots of men do it. Now, did I get ripped apart for it sometimes? Actually, I did. Comments like, what kind of mom would do that? But it's funny that those thoughts don't come about, when the dads leave, they're the hero, right? Good on you for doing that. Well, my husband, he was a true hero too. He took care of the kids, and he did not have an easy job. He's a border patrol agent. He was at the time, basically he's a BORTAC agent, which means he is essentially special forces for the border patrol. So he was on their tactical team. So he was not doing an easy job when he said, you know what, honey, we got to do this. And we did it. We accomplished it. I graduated from weapons school in December of 2009, and I went back to my squadron, and I was a weapons officer, and I did my best to make the biggest impact I could, helping as many people as possible, kind of just gain knowledge and support our troops over there as best we could. And that's where my direct impact in the 9/12 story kind of backs off a little bit, because at that point, after flying as the weapons officer for a few years, I transitioned. I got a waiver for my cervical spine reconstruction, and I ended my career at Laughlin as a full-time reservist flying in the T-38 because I absolutely love teaching. And again, even though that mission isn't directly impacting the troops on the ground, if you roll it back enough, hundreds of pilots that I trained went forward and helped our troops on the ground and helped those missions over in the Middle East. So thank you very much for listening to my story. I hope this story changes the way you think a little bit, and maybe helps somebody in the future believe in themselves that they can go do big things.